Howdy, and welcome to Baking with Beard. Is that what we're calling this? Baking with the Beard? Baking with Bun Beard. Baking bread with the big lad. Wait, hold on. Now we're in baking mode. Need some of this. Got one of these. Welcome to day 2, session 2 of getting your sourdough bread ready to eat. Juno's been sat since we last played with her 24 hours ago, up on the shelf, nice and warm, happy as Larry. Today, we're feeding. We're going to cover the fundamental thing you'll spend the most time doing with your sourdough, and that is feeding your starter. Like a dog or a cat or a child, you need to feed it. You need to keep it alive, and you need to do it regularly. I've not touched it since we did this yesterday, and if you're just finding this video for the first time and wondering what's going on, flip back onto yesterday's and you'll see how we started. Grab your starter and let's get ready to do a feeding, and we're going to take a bit of time to understand what is happening during the feeding process, why you do it, and how you can mess it up or how you can maximise it. Yesterday, we combined our 2 different types of flour and water into here. If you only had one type of flour, that was fine. In the last 24 hours, all the active ingredients, all that kind of dormant wild yeast that's naturally in flour, started to bond together and act together and start to consume itself and basically start to ferment. To keep that process going and healthy, we now need to discard half of what is in here and add in some fresh. And that's done because the wild yeast inside of the flour gets used up quite quickly. If we were to leave that like it is for 3 or 4 or 5 days, it would eat up all of that yeast and it would start to basically rot and mould. Before it does that, it produces a little bit of alcohol called baker's hooch as well, which you'll notice if you leave it somewhere too warm or for too long between feedings, you'll get a little thin film of liquid on top, but we'll speak about that later. So today, we're going to throw away half of what's in there, roughly, add in some fresh yeast so we can continue that fermentation. Your sourdough gets better and better and better over time, the more fermenting that goes on. It's as simple as that. Your sourdough in 6 months' time will be better than it will be 2 weeks from now. In 3 years' time, it'll be better than it will be in 6 months' time. And that's because you're continually adding in fresh yeast to the culture, fresh flour and wild yeast to the culture, and it's getting better and stronger. The stronger it gets, that's when you get a lot more rise out of your loaf, as we get those nice big air pockets inside, or the structure, not an air pocket technically. But today, very simple, feeding number 1. How I'm going to do this is, I know we put in there yesterday 200 grams worth of stuff. It's 100 grams of water, 50 grams of wholemeal flour, and 50 grams of white flour. So 200 grams are inside of there. I don't need to know how much this weighs. It would be useful, but I kind of work backwards. So I know there's 200 grams in there. I'm going to take out enough so that I'll set up a second set of scales over here. So I'm going to basically take out about 100 grams, roughly. You can eyeball it if you want, but it is important to make sure you're throwing away around half, because again, like I said, you get rid of all of that spent yeast and you're replacing it, replenishing it all with fresh. If you take out too little, you're going to start to get a bit of mould and it's going to start to go too mature. Right, half it coming out. You can see it's all nice, a little bit sticky now. The scale's just turned off, that's a pain in the bum, isn't it? Right, get rid of that. Bloop. That was 25. That's about 80. Doody dumby ba. Boop. Boop. That's about 90 grams thrown away. That'll do me. Roughly half. Now I'm going to add in basically the same amounts that we put in there yesterday. So today I'm going to add in 50 grams total of flour and then 50 grams of water. Okay, so I've taken out about 100 and I'm putting about 100 total back into my mixture. I personally like to mix it up between what flours I'm putting in there. Like I said, all flour is slightly different depending on the quality of the grains used and how it's been milled. So I think going into your starter, putting different things in can actually be quite beneficial, can really help that culture develop. So yesterday, where I put in half white and half wholemeal, today I'm going to put in just white. I'm going to stick in 50 grams of just white. If you're working on just standard all-purpose plain flour, because that's all we've got in the cupboards, crack on, just stick in 50 grams of that today. If over the next few days you can find yourself some bread flour, some wholemeal flour, that's going to really help when it comes to baking time. Right, popping it back on the scales. 0. 50 grams of my finest white flour. Standard white flour. 23. Bingo. 50 grams of water. Fresh out the tap. Like we said yesterday, if you live in a hard or a soft water area or in the middle of a city, try and give your water a filter first. Doesn't matter too much, but the better quality water, the better everything kind of works in here. I've added in just over my 50 grams. I'm going to give this all a nice little mix. Tomorrow, I'll go back to the combination of flour, of white and wholemeal. Right, again, the key here with mixing it all up, mixing up Baby Juno, is we've got no dry bits. No dry clumps stuck together. See how this pot's getting all dirty around the edges? Don't worry about that. That happens. Like I said, you'll probably transfer it into a new pot after a couple of weeks. It's not a runny consistency. It's got a little bit of stickiness to it, but it's fairly free flowing. If you followed what I've done today and you've done just white today, having done white and wholemeal yesterday, you'll notice the colour's changed quite a little bit. Now there's more white in there. That is fed. So, where are we up to? Day 1, we created the very beginning of our starter. We mixed the flour and the water together and we've let it sit for 24 hours. Now, day 2, we've come to do our first feeding. We've discarded half of the mixture and we've added another 100 grams back in there. 50 flour, 50 water. Tomorrow, we're going to do exactly the same thing as we've just done today. But we're also going to start to prepare the other stuff in the kitchen we need for being able to bake, hopefully in 2 days' time. Right now, this is looking good. If you want to keep an eye on it, what you want to keep an eye out or a nose out for is a slight sour note. Sourdough, sour note. And also little bubbles, little tiny 1 or 2 bubbles forming. By the end of the week, this thing will be nice and bubbly, and that will show how active it is. That's effectively a measure of how good of a job you've done of creating a live culture. The bubbles are a good sign. We'll work later on in the week to make sure we don't get it too active or we don't get any of that mould or any of that brewer's hooch that I mentioned. But for right now, day 2, nice and easy. If you've got any questions, let me know down below. Bear in mind, I'll probably cover off a bulk of the stuff naturally during the course of tomorrow's episodes. But if you've got any questions about what we've done so far, let me know. Let me know what you've named your starter. Again, this is Juno. I'm interested to know what you've named it. Giving it a name serves a purpose. It's going to remind you that that thing needs feeding. Because if you don't feed it, it goes a bit sideways. Once you've done a few bakes and this is nice and alive, we can start to store it in the fridge or somewhere else colder, and therefore we don't need to feed it every day. But for now, where we're trying to get her up and alive, we're going to feed it every day. With that in mind, I'll see you back here tomorrow for feeding 2, episode 3 of baking with the big guy. Is that what we called it? Baking with the big guy. Baking with the beard. Baking without the bun. Baking for the bun. Nice. See you guys later.